fusion would be a better way to go forward. I think there are some startups doing fusion at
high-powered laser, and they use these for air defense as well.
When the goals start to get a little bit more abstract, you could probably manipulate them, you can code them, you can also lose track.
But also, I think they have found ways to sort of streamline parts of the process.
Welcome to the 6th episode of the newly rebranded Beyond the Algorithm.
Yeah. New backdrop, new adding, new everything. So follow the episode.
Today's topic, we are discussing the future of energy. And the first question we'd like to address is today's energy. What does the present landscape look like? Where are we at with energy production, the cost of energy, and what we need to pursue for the same technological growth that we've seen this year? So, Ismail, I'd be interested to know your thoughts as an AI founder now. Where do you see the present landscape of energy, and where do you see us going?
So with the current state of things, with AI and all the data centers we're using at the moment, I'd say we're in a prime position where we're really seeing the limitations of our energy infrastructure, and we're really seeing where we have the abundance. It does seem like I was working with Aisha before, we have patches of areas. It's more like local deficiencies in electricity rather than global deficiency. So I've seen online a lot, people talking about, ChatGPT taking a lot of energy, a lot of gallons of water being used. Yeah. I did some research, and actually, if we take it from the global sense, let's see how it is in the global sense, right? Europe, as we all know, the electricity costs are insane.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And
that will also triple that of North America's.
Yeah.
For context.
Exactly, yeah. So we are a major disadvantage compared to the US in terms of electricity usage. Electricity bills and infrastructure. Because, it's just electricity is more expensive here, right? And I think that's a big problem to do with innovation as well. If electricity is more expensive, your costs rise, less money for R&D and everything else, which makes sense. Ireland does have their data centers, which are well known, used by Microsoft and everyone else, but the major data centers we're looking at for ChatGPT, for example, is like Virginia, Texas, places where electricity is cheap. Yeah. But that also comes with the cost of, if it's cheap, that means everyone's using it. There's a lot of it. And as we can see online, which is why people are having this sort of craze of AI, is the local communities in Virginia and Texas are suffering from the lack of water or electricity because their nuisance is taking it. So I think it's quite interesting to see that sort of local crises.
Yeah, for sure. And you see the price of electricity being a massive driver for where these data centers are being developed. You've said North America, it's worth also pointing to Eastern Europe. The cost of electricity in Eastern Europe is actually far closer to the cost of electricity in North America than they are to the cost of electricity here in the UK, which is I think Ofgem this year, their price cap for October to December was something like 24 to 28 pence, where in the States you're getting 12 cents per kilowatt hour. 12 cents, so half.
Yeah, I mean, not even half. 12 cents is about 8.
Yeah, true. It's a lot lower.
Yeah,
it's a lot lower, and supply is meeting demand. Across the board, as you say, globally speaking, it's not as if we have any acute shortages. I think last 2024, there's enough data out there in the international. The IEA, which I cannot remember at present what that stands for.
International Energy Agency.
There we are. IEA came out steer of our production being the total energy consumption in 2024 was something like 680 exajoules, which over the course of the year breaks down to about 20 terawatts of power. That's kind of where we're at the moment. And we touched briefly in planning this episode on the importance of discussing what that means for us as a civilization. And the Russian scientist Kardashev, he developed, I think, There are lots of other scales against which we can reference the progress of humanity against other potential civilizations out there. But certainly energy usage plays a massive role in the technological advancement and also our ability to communicate with these other with these other civilizations. I mean, the amount of energy it takes to get communications off planet and into deep space is immense. We presently sit beneath a Type 1, which is that's the most central 0.7, right? Yeah, it's 0.72. And like Type 1 is just full planetary harvesting, like the harvesting of the Earth's, the energy available to us on this planet. So we're at 0.72.
My question to that is, when we want to reach to 1, is that going to be tougher or is that going to be easier? Because in terms of technological advancement, we're like sort of refining and optimizing our strategies of generating energy. So would it be harder to gain that extra 26% or 26 points or 28?
Yeah.
Would that be harder or would that be easier? It's like where we right now with it.
Then how we got to where we are, I think it's going to be harder. And I say that because as much as the other episodes will touch on the climate, so I think we park that for now. It is true that at the moment, like we're, I think something like 80% reliant on fossil fuels for energy.
80%, yeah, 80%.
And irrespective of whether or not those do actually regenerate, because I have seen some very interesting studies around like oil cycles. Certainly, as we start becoming an ever more power-hungry civilization, the rate at which those naturally regenerate will limit the rate at which we can advance and the power that we can actually use. So, like, the step in technologies will need to be gigantic to get to a place where we can, as an example, like what we were talking about earlier, achieve something like total solar insolation, which would be a good threshold for Type 1 civilization.
If we want to like reach Type 1, we should use like something like 10,000 more energy of consumption.
It's I've got the hybrid down. It's something like in the next 35 years to 2060, the machine learning models which have forecasted human energy consumption predict that it's going to grow like by about 50%.
What?
And the growth,
That's not going to hit your target of what was it just now? You said 10,000
10,000 more energy than
10,000 times,
times more energy.
and we're talking about 50% increase.
But 10,000 times more energy is it proportional for the same population is the question. Like, are we looking at a civil? My question is, does the scale gauge on how much of our solar system we harvest, or how much of our solar system we harvest per capita, like per unit of population? Is what I'm asking.
the system that Kardashev developed, I believe, her civilization, right? Yeah, it's independent of a per capita assessment. It's dependent solely on like the power available to us. What percentage of that are we harvesting? So the Type 1 civilization is just total planetary power. Type 2 then is total solar power. So like, can we capture the power of our sun? And then Type 3 galactic, it's just like every star within a galaxy. Like, are we able to harvest that? Are we able to store it? Are we able to use that? And then there have been speculations, especially over, I've seen a couple recent and very interesting questions raised around the potential for universes to be stored within like a black hole. And if that's the case, then the Type 4 civilization becomes something that we start to consider, which would be the total energy harvested of a known universe.
But how can we like look at Type 4 when we even haven't like achieved Type?
Well, it's all very speculative, right? And where we are at the moment, like, if to hit total solar insolation, to hit that Type 1, that would provide us with 170 petawatts of energy. Like that would be our production, which, to put into perspective, we are presently at 20 terawatts, which is where what you were saying. Like we are
50 times?
well, we're 4 orders of magnitude off.
Well, 20 from 170 is about like 8 times less, let's say.
8 times less, and then it's 5 times less. That would be 8 times 10 to the 4. That's how far we are off. Like the idea of total solar insolation.
So what are the next close steps we have to do to reach that type 1?
Well, this brings us
And not being like speculative at the same time.
This brings us to the second question, which is like, how do we achieve energy abundance?
Before we go on to the second question, I'll just currently, so I have a stat here from the Renewable Institute.
Yeah.
It says, so global energy investment is set to reach a record of 3.3 trillion in 2025. Okay. So there's that 1.1 trillion of that is put into like fossil fuels and natural gas, stuff like that. But the 2.2 is spent into renewable, nuclear, electricity grid, storage, low emission fuels, efficiency measures, and electrification. So for every dollar spent on fossil fuels, $2 is spent on renewable energies. So there is some hope. And I think if we really do shift, that's because if we're still putting so much focus into fossil fuels, like
We're restricting ourselves.
Yes, yeah, we're putting our brain power to something.
I'd also say, like, in terms of the cost, I was thinking about it as well. We put more money into renewables, but at the same time, renewables cost us more at the moment, and they're not consistent with it. So I think
This balance.
yeah, the balance could we need to be able to balance the investment. The money is obviously going to be more for renewables, right? But I think the world, we'll probably talk about it in the next question about like nuclear, but we need to put more investment into energy resources that are more sustainable.
Energy resources and infrastructure. And we were talking about the curtailment costs, which have been placed on the shoulders of the population in the UK. Like, to give you've mentioned that they're less stable. Renewables are less stable. And that's very true. True enough that the British public, so far, and there was an article published earlier this year that had said, back in January this year, that had the total curtailment costs spent on telling wind farmers to shut off their power and spending money elsewhere for a more renewable gas supply of energy, they had that total at 1.8 billion, because our grid cannot support the surges that wind farms can produce. Because if you're dependent on the wind and it's a windy day and you're outputting a huge amount of energy, at the moment we're not capturing that. We're actually turning them off because we don't have the ability to capture and store that energy. A lot of work needs to be done on the tech and on the infrastructure that could then facilitate like an efficient use of that, right?
Because then it comes to the question of like, well, we could, if there were surges, we could use batteries, but I think China already tried that. And I don't know if that went specifically well, seeing as now nuclear seems to be the way forward for both US and China.
Well, nuclear is certainly just far more stable as well. Like, you're not reliant on external factors for that kind of production. Yes. So when it comes to fission and fusion, these are both things that can be turned on and off and that provide consistent streams of power whilst in use. And if we're happy, I think this is a wonderful segue into that second question. On the question then specifically of nuclear energy, we've spoken, Arsha, a fair bit about this. And for a pathway to genuine energy abundance here on Earth and increasing the production and consumption of energy to a point of a Kardashev 1 civilization, what part do you see nuclear playing in that?
I think nuclear is really important, and that's why like Microsoft and Google are just going all in nuclear specifically for AI infrastructure, because we need like consistent power to train all these LLMs. But at the same time, it's not the ultimate one, as we were discussing. I guess fusion would be a better way to go forward. I think there are some startups doing fusion at the moment, but it's like it's too speculative at the same time. I think we're like 2 decades.
I think we're spending. So I'm not saying that the because as a civilization, obviously to level up, we'll need to be able to harness the power of fusion.
Yeah.
But I think in the current sense, we're spending so much time trying to solve that power of fusion.
Yeah, it's a hard problem.
And it's a hard problem to
So
solve.
we should focus on like the next decade first. That's why I say like nuclear power plant first would be a better approach, with a vision to actually change to fusion over time with the technological advance.
Make sure that we bridge that gap. And
Exactly.
First, we get it generalized, and then we can level up, I think.
Yes. And there is something which I don't have any idea of what it does, like what it means. I want to ask you about. It's like space-based solar power, which Elon always talks about. And it's like orbital solar arrays powering like AI. Yeah, potentially like hundreds of gigawatts. What does it mean? Like, what's the approach there?
well, there are. I read a NASA article last night about this actually. Practically speaking, it would be solar arrays, solar power, satellite stations, I guess, which would capture the sun's energy outside of our atmosphere, change that into electrical energy, beams that still outside of the atmosphere. So I'm assuming, because I don't know this tech intimately, but I'm assuming that would be some form of photovoltaic process. And it would then beam that energy back to Earth in low frequency microwaves. And there would be antennas around the Earth that would receive that and convert those microwaves then back into energy. Obviously, then that raises a lot of questions.
Did you mention anything about storage there? I didn't hear anything about storage.
Well, no, they would be
Exactly. I was going to say being directly. I was thinking about that in my head, like, because I think storage is a huge problem. We've got so many materials on the earth, to try and store this energy, and it seems like energy, like, we'll kind of be limiting ourselves if we're just trying to store energy. So if we just have this feedback loop, then perfect.
It is perfect.
Should be quicker as well. Yeah.
But it raises a couple questions. Cost feasibility at the moment, this is an expensive system. It is much more expensive than fission and fusion, actually. As we were talking about earlier, of course, with matured processes, costs will come down, and Musk has done a tremendous job facilitating reusable launch platforms. He has, because that alone has changed this landscape and made this feasible. But one of my main concerns is the transmission of energy back to Earth, because microwaves are, in low dosage, they are safe for humans. But
I think they are. But I was thinking about where we're going now. It's going on.
the problem is we're restricted to the amount of energy that we can transfer back by the frequencies of these waves and the amplitudes of the waves that we're sending back to Earth. So to keep them in safe levels, we're going to see limits being placed.
We'll talk bottleneck on how we.
There's going to be a bottleneck, which obviously over time that's going to be chucked down the drain. But even at these low levels, it still causes cellular heating. And how will that affect the environment where the antennas receiving the microwaves will be stationed? Like, how is that going to affect these ecosystems? How is that going to affect the temperature of the Earth as well if we're beaming microwaves back at ourselves from space? Obviously, these are all concerns, and we've not even discussed the potential for that system to be a weapons system. Like this, a pure energy weapon, which is what this would basically be. If you could pure energy weapon. Yeah, what do you mean by that? Well, if you increase the frequency of the waves and you are just beaming high-powered waves of a high-powered electromagnetic wave back at any specific location at Earth, the damage that could cause would be tremendous.
Essentially a laser.
Sounds to me, they've already built these systems locally. So you will have, I don't know which country specifically, but they've already built laser systems.
Yeah.
For like non-violent, harmless laser, just push you away from like, there's a protest where I remember seeing some system like this. And then they obviously had the other system, which is like lethal, which is just literally a high power laser.
A high-powered laser, and they use these for air defense as well. Like you can use these to take missiles down. And obviously, this is slightly dependent on the weather when we start talking about lasers, because lasers are reflected. So you need to make sure it's not a cloudy day if you're going to be using this tool. And a laser would be a more accurate device for transmitting this energy, as an example. But here we have questions surrounding like past the sci-fi reality, because frankly, like if we're thinking about it, it's already been developed. There's an excellent book by one of the key figures in Skunk Works, the Lockheed Martin kind of secret aerospace division, which is, I mean, fascinating. It was from Skunk Works that the SR-71 Blackbird was developed and came. But he's basically said if you can theorize it, it's been done. But past like these sci-fi energy weapons, think about what would happen if you didn't have total and guaranteed synchronization of satellite with antenna. Let's say that microwave beam just wandered. Right?
Yeah.
Just a tiny, like a small angle. It just wandered.
Yeah, that's it.
Then all of a sudden it's like, well, that town down the road is now getting beamed with microwaves.
Yeah, because theoretically, in my mind, yeah, sure, you could just build a center. You have a satellite up here, and you could build a center directly underneath it, for example.
Yeah.
And it can just make sure no one's there, and just boom, and it's just, I don't know, somehow taking in the energy but dispersing it somewhere. Yeah, right. So that's good. But yeah, like you said, maybe if it's like just on 1 degree more, that's it. Or when I was thinking, I mean, is there diffusion in lasers? Is that laser going to diffuse or no?
Well, it would depend on like the clarity of the skies, and it would depend on like the refraction of the atmosphere in that laser. And there's so many things which I can't comment on, not being a proper physicist and not understanding these lasers properly. But you know, these are very good questions, and like these are things that need to be raised, because I do think that in terms of advancing on the Kardashev scale and guaranteeing energy abundance for humanity, we need to be looking at like the power source of our solar system, like the power that the sun outputs and gives to our planet, is like that would bring us to incredible energy abundance if we were to hit that. So how do we do that safely? How do we do that effectively? And this needs to be considered, because the microwaves to me, like, okay, in a perfect system, a perfect world, maybe those could work, but surely that bottlenecks us. And if it bottlenecks us, like the next step would then be to increase the energy of like the output of these satellites. And if you do that, then all of a sudden the risks start mounting exponentially. I think, yeah, go on.
No, please.
No, you go.
Okay. So what was if we flip this question the other way? So we're looking at energy abundance. That's okay. What's the purpose of energy? Is, to me, I could be wrong, is to serve some other product.
Yeah.
Like, right? So how about maybe we can just go straight to the product and make it more efficient. Yes, there are bottlenecks.
Yeah.
But then it's like, optic fiber is really quick. You know, like the upload speeds and everything is like actually 10 to 20 times faster than copper wires underground.
Yeah, because it's just light traveling through.
Exactly. But it takes 1/3 of the energy. So instead of just looking at energy abundance, we should also be looking at the energy efficiency.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So I think that's a great stance. Instead of thinking, oh damn, I need to have like 20 fission reactors and like any time is the sun, like maybe you just need to make better tools, maximize these first.
Absolutely. That's actually, I was going to lead on to that. We've largely solved the generational problem of solar power. So before they used to be inefficient, and now it's dropped 90% since 2010. So you used to be able to, it was like $165 per kilowatt hour before, and now it's 0.043 per kilowatt hour. That's for solar. But I think the main problem that's related to the state of affairs is that we, as even US, are behind. I have some figures here which I thought were quite interesting. China is building nuclear reactors in 5 years for $2,400 per kilowatt. The West takes 15 years and spends $15,000 or more. It's the same technology, but different execution, right? And it's like people are wondering, oh, how is China catching up in AI?
Well, China is not efficient though. They're just heavily investing in like compute power and energy. But they're also able to like the tech or like the hardware to make it efficient. So it's just like building more.
But they're building money, but they're building more and faster.
Yeah,
Right.
they're actually catching.
They're catching up, yeah.
Right? And that's the reason. But is that the efficient way in long term? Like how long can actually they just pour money into infrastructure?
It can be argued that because they have a different system of they're communist, it's like prices are different and whatever. You could argue that it's a bit skewed to say that they're faster. But at the same time, like it does look like because they feel that they need to be ahead, they've invested that time into making those processes efficient. I'm not saying necessarily that they are massively ahead in terms of the technology, but I think they found ways as a community, right?
No, in case of energy and compute power, they're ahead.
They're ahead. Yeah, it has. Yeah.
So they found a way, because obviously US thought they were ahead. I mean, they're still ahead.
I think the same as different.
China is catching up fast, and at the same like catching up is like a relative term, because like they could have already caught up. It's just that because they're building everything simultaneously, it's like a click. You'll see it. It's like it's a generational thing, but it's like the moment of realization is not gradual.
I would be slightly concerned by this though, because it does cost much more over here to develop these fission centers, because I think that's primarily what we're talking about right now. It costs a lot more for, I think, several reasons. We have much more red tape, firstly. Like, it's both a good thing and a bad thing. I'm not a big fan of red tape, but when it comes to nuclear fission power plants, you have got to not cut corners. We've seen what cut corners looks like. We saw this in the 20th century. We cannot let a repeat of that occur. Like the implications of a fallout from one of these, it lacks the isolation that a nuclear warhead has. This is very dirty, and Chernobyl, I believe, is going to be uninhabitable for the next 20,000 years.
What, the 1,000 year? Like I thought it got to a point that the duration like that is going to be habitable like in the next 10 years or something. No,
like they've got it. No, it's not.
No. Chernobyl will be uninhabitable. It might not be 20. It might be 10. I can't remember the exact figure, but irrespective, it's within tens of thousands of years. Can you imagine if we were to have like more than one fallout in Europe?
Just would lose Earth patches that we can't.
Well, and this is where, like, okay, China's spending a lot less, but what does that mean? Like, it may well be that they have just developed far more efficient processes for construction. I would be concerned if there were shortcuts being taken.
I think it's the folly, right? Because China produces a lot of rare earth. Well, they extract a lot of rare earth metals. Huge. They are the supplier, right? So I think it costs them less because they are the supplier, but also because, I mean, people are cheap, right? You have a large population, but also I think they have found ways to sort of streamline parts of the process to the point that they can get it cut down. I don't know necessarily that if they've cut corners. We'll see that.
I'm not saying they have. I just like for the figures you provided, there's no idea, Brett, that it would fill me with a deal of concern if it were to come to light later on that corners have been cut. And this brings us to nuclear fusion, because as a technology, this needs to be pushed. And I completely agree that we can't sit around twiddling our thumbs waiting for people to figure out nuclear fusion. Like, we need to be guaranteeing energy security in the meantime. But as a technology, pound for pound, fusion provides 4 times the energy.
Of fission?
Fission. Yeah, sorry, pound for pound, it's 4 times the energy. To put this into perspective, 1 kilogram of hydrogen which is the fuel used. I believe it's tritium that they use, the radioactive isotope of hydrogen, which has 3 neutrons in its atomic makeup. I've got this noted that this 1 kilogram of hydrogen would be capable alone of generating 750 terajoules of energy. And although that seems small, but it's 1%, 0.1% of total energy consumption in 2024. The hydrogen is very abundant to most. So if we could be streamlining this process, and the thing is, like, the fallout, the tritium has a half-life of, I think, 12.3 years.
Oh,
The half-life,
long.
no, it's quite short.
Is that? Oh, okay.
The half-life of some of the radioactive isotopes that are waste of fission are usually quite long, like 500,000 years.
All right. Moving to Chernobyl, is that why Chernobyl lasted so long?
Well, this is why Chernobyl is going to be uninhabitable for so long, because the breakdown of some of these, like, it will take an incredible amount of time for that fuel to become safe. And this is why there is investment in Europe presently. Again, I can't remember if it's Sweden or Norway, but there's work being put into burying nuclear waste, something like 430 to 450 meters underground in disused mines, which, okay, again, it's slightly concerning because we still don't, I've not seen the studies, and I would happily look into these deeper, and I will. But I would be very intrigued to know, like, what does that do to our groundwater? Like, as an example, like, so they're doing this on an island, ways away from civilization, I believe. An island that is still close, though, to 2 major fission reactors. What does that do to the ecosystem into which that's, like, imposed? Because uranium is incredibly common. Like, as an earth mineral, uranium is not in short supply. But uranium by itself, like, although it's radioactive, compared to some of these isotopes, which then are like an artificial product of fission reactions, like, we are putting new and different radioactive isotopes into an area. And okay, it might not affect us directly because we put it 450 meters underground under bedrock and we're not living there. But, like, what if that affects our food supply? What if, like, mercury gets into water, right? And you see a lot of mercury.
I think that the way nuclear reactors are dealt with when the rods are finished is, at the moment, a very, like, rigorous process. It's like, oh, it is put there anymore. But I understand what you mean in the sense of contamination. I think it is something critical, but what I think is the main driver of using these methods is that possibly, if I'm not wrong, we haven't got to the stage of density of these mines that we can see the impact, right? Because we only have so many nuclear reactors at the moment. We are going to get to a point where we have a lot of them, at which point, when we have massive deposits of radioactive waste, we might start seeing a rising background radiation or something of the sorts.
Well,
Should be interesting to see.
and my concern comes from also the fact that a lot of these are privately owned, and because they're privately owned, it's, obviously profit first. So you say it's dealt with rigorously, and yeah, I don't disagree. Like, the protocols that we have in place are intricate and thorough. But as an example, one of the largest places in the world for radioactive waste is being stored in disused fusion reactors, which is one of the ways in which they are disposed. Sellafield, it's in the UK, right? A hugely populated country, like, and we are putting a lot of nuclear waste in this plant. It takes something like 100,000 men to make sure that that plant is safe. Like, that's what it takes to equip that with the necessary people. Like, at the moment, my concern comes from, I think, both a lack of knowledge, but also, like, as you say, we don't know what the implications are down the line with higher levels of waste and with systems where, okay, we're theorizing what happens, but in real life, what does it look like?
Maybe it would be an opportunity to like eject stuff into space, but then we have a problem with waste in space, right?
And there's an article. Well, yeah, and this is where I think like that. Yeah, we should be say if Elon has reusable rockets, it'll just be yeah, but if we ever want to have like this satellite away, like we're shooting stuff up that becomes space debris, and like there was that crack on the space station window that was caused by a fleck of paint that was orbiting Earth at tens of thousands of kilometers per second. And I know, I think it was actually tens of thousands of kilometers an hour. Could be fact checked, but like irrespective, this window on the space station is like ballistic. It's crazy, and it was cracked by a fleck of paint. Let's think like we're chucking rods up there that even if we were to crush this all down and put it in space as dust, like okay, the crush process would be itself a huge problem because like a lot of these isotopes, the ones that are most dangerous are alpha emitters, and alpha emitters are actually fairly safe if they're kept like 10 feet away from you, because obviously alpha ionizes the air around it. It's a big particle. But the minute you crush it and it's dust and it can be airborne, then let's say that gets in your lungs. Your chances of survival are not particularly high.
I was thinking, so we have the issue of radioactive waste, and at the moment we don't have an effective solution other than to take it underground. But if we get to a point where, like Elon is doing at the moment, where the cost of sending stuff up is getting cheaper, wouldn't it be maybe I was thinking as like an alternative solution to have sort of like a deposit, like a space deposit, where you just have a warm hub, if you know what I mean? Because like radioactive waste takes a long time to cool down because of the radiation, right? I'm talking like, I'm looking at the years, I'm like 100,000, like whatever.
Yeah.
Right?
The elephant's butt is still.
So if you have a bank of rods which are not used for anything else than just heat, there could be some uses that we just haven't used before, right? I mean, it's like all energy is energy. Like, I don't know what, if you have like a, I don't know, 100-kilometer radius of like unused rods which are safely deposited and you just use the heat for something.
That's not a point. Or we're talking about now using the moon as kind of an intermediary between us and Mars, because you could potentially refuel on the moon. There's no atmosphere, so the energy it takes to move from the moon is far lower than it takes to get a vehicle out of the Earth's atmosphere and out of the gravitational, the strongest gravitational field. We could potentially build repositories for this stuff on the moon. Because it's not like, I'm sure the moon could be used for many things, but
it's like a backup supply, right? Because if it's still hot, you can still evaporate stuff with it. It's just not hot to the point of it's like not.
it's no longer actually. It's no longer fission
It's
fuel.
no longer fission fuel. It's just hot rods, right? You can't use it for anything other than straight conduction. But no, yeah, it has to be looked into basically.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think again, like it's more of the motive with private companies, right? It's cheaper to just stuff underground. They might not go for that type of innovation. So,
and this is where I do think like the regulatory red tape is very helpful, because this is like, we need to be approaching this one slowly, because if we are toxifying our world, we need to be doing so in such a way that we don't then end up accidentally crippling our own food security or our water security. Like this needs to be considered.
which leads on to our third question, actually.
Exactly. And I'm curious to have Daniel's thoughts on this one first. So, what implications would energy abundance have for us living here on Earth?
I think it's I was thinking earlier. So the reason why there is a need for more energy is because sort of human manpower is not really needed anymore. We're probably like gonna use like Tesla robots, or we're gonna use like a electric Uber that doesn't even have a driver. So we don't actually need manpower that are doing all of our things. So we need to have energy to like power these other things, right? So it's going to be, we're going to be less dependent on these things. Like you don't need a Uber driver. I don't even need a maid, right? I can just get a Tesla robot to do it, right? Yeah, what's the school and back? Yeah, it's like what's powering the Tesla robot? Yeah, right. And I think another good way to look at this is you can't just look at the energy that the thing is using. It's like at the start of energy, like for EVs, for electric cars, and people think, oh, we're saving loads of energy.
Yeah.
Like, but there's no it's electric, right?
Yeah.
How's the lithium battery made? Oh, there's a massive coal generator down the road of the lithium ion battery like factory, right? Yeah. So we need to start looking at that. But I think maybe more energy equals maybe more power to provide the things that are doing our dirty work. So maybe more free time for us.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a good thing.
I think, you raised a good point of where the lithium ion batteries come from, right?
Would have to.
If we make a closed loop of net zero, I think that's what we probably would be looking into, where we have no energy wasted and more efficient energy made. Yes, I mean, the point I was also going to bring up is that we are constrained by energy economics.
Yeah.
What we do is based on how much energy we can make. AI consumes a lot of energy. It's like 3.6 kilowatt hours per cubic meter. There's like direct air capture consumes about 3,000 kilowatt hours. That's to do with CO2 and emissions, right? And then vertical farming uses 38.8 kilowatt hours per kilogram of produce. So we're talking about, like, as you were talking about before, in terms of energy, we need a lot of energy, and our population is growing, right? So our problem is only going to get bigger. We have to find ways, right?
And the positive solutions need to become ever more radical. I'm interested to know what both of you think as innovators and entrepreneurs about the question of optional work be a byproduct of energy abundance. Because Daniel has raised a very good point that manpower is not needed as much these days as it was previously. And in the future, I think it's pretty plain to see that we'll be needing much less of it. And I think that's a positive thing in many ways, because if we can be taking people out of very high-risk jobs and instead putting robots in, I personally don't believe that these are silicon-based life forms, so I have no qualms if one of them were to be destroyed in the process of work. Whereas, like, whereas a human dying in the same situation, I'd have a much larger problem with. But this does mean that the job market will either need to change drastically, or, and I think this is more likely, we are going to see broad levels of unemployment and at least a real lack of motivation. We've talked before about how comfort breeds complacency.
Yeah.
And this is the ultimate comfort. Like, your home is heated. You never need to worry about that. You have the energy necessary to complete all your tasks without you having to do a thing. How do you both view motivation in an era where you don't need to work, thanks to this freely available energy?
Yeah. Before answering this question, I want to address something that appears deep when the two is discussing regarding like AI and energy and the stats you provided. So I think if we look at history, like from 2010 to 2020, the problem with the like development of all these LLMs and AI architecture were mostly like the data, the GPUs, and like the algorithm itself, right? And then 2020 to 2025, it was like scalability. And that's why we need energy and the compute power. But the next 10 years, again, we have to go back to the algorithm to make it efficient for the energy usage rather than just hoping for more energy or just relying on more energy supply. Otherwise, we're going to be like China spending too much money on compute power, which is not going to be efficient. So that should be like the second thing that we look into to like get more energy supply. But first we have to like develop better hardware to have like more intelligence per joule for each like GPU or like CPU even, I would say. So I think that would be a better approach to look at things, at least in the tech side. And for us, like startup founders, if you're doing something in deep tech, you need infrastructure and compute power. So that's the point. I think Sam Altman was saying something really interesting about this, and he was saying the cost of AI will converge to the cost of energy after 2 decades, which is right. But what about the next 2 decades? It's not about the energy. It's about the efficiency that Daniel brought up. So I think that was the point. Regarding the workflow and the energy abundance, I think we're going to have, because we've discussed like universal basic income and stuff, but I think it would be like universal basic compute, which is like a layer of having an energy abundance. It would be good to some extent to have like independency to focus on other issues, but there would be some sort of emptiness for us to have all these things. Yeah, the complete lack of any struggle to survive, and that's like instinct to survive is actually one of our like superpowers. Yeah, industrialization, a key driver. So that's my point here.
But I think it's quite interesting, and I'd be interested to know what you think. That's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is the energy would abound, and with such abundance would come unimaginable opportunities, especially for people in your shoes. Like you are going into the deep tech areas, where energy is, although regardless of whether or not it's now a threshold, down the line,
If we does, it would be like to have it. We can just build up anything. Like
limitlessly.
it wouldn't be exponential. It would be much higher.
What, really? Is it higher than exponential?
It would be probably if we have like energy abundance, because like that's the key factor that limits us. And I would say now and in the next like 20 years.
Yeah, I'd say you address the point of what are we going to do if we have energy. And I think at least from my experience and everything else. Well, I think you guys can also relate. It's like in terms of the core principles of survival, we rely on food, water, shelter, right?
And heat,
Yeah. But we can all agree that that's not something necessarily that we worry about day by day, right?
No.
And I think it comes to that level of there's levels to the game, right? And what I wanted to address, which came to mind, was, well, we've already leveled up society in a sense that now it's like, oh, it's necessary to have money. It's necessary to have a job. It's like we value education, like we have assessments, right? If we don't get the assessments, like, oh, it's the end of the world, right? That's the type of thing, right? Well, not in Canada, but it's more, it's like our societal structure. There's certain things that have become survival that are not necessarily survival, right? We're gonna still live if we fail the exam. We're gonna still live if we don't make money, right? So I think it comes again, maybe in the sense of education, where like the next generation with an abundance of energy would then have an extra set of survival parameters that they need to take into account. It's like, oh, I also need to like achieve some specific milestone or else, right? I'm not necessarily saying that get people brainwashed and conditioned to do specific things, but we need to have another level of purpose above what we already have in society. So I think if we get to a point where we have an abundance of energy and we have like no human has to do anything to survive or even make money in society, there would be another level, I think. I think we get to a point where just as how we went from bartering to money, we go from money to something else. not necessarily that money would be replaced, but we would have different goals as humans. The goal would be who can innovate the most. Or if I don't innovate this much, I'm not going to survive. That type of thing.
Yeah, no, you change the goals.
Yeah, you change the goals because at the end of the day, you adapt you adapt ourselves. Like I think they're very good at adapt. What it means for the human would change.
That's fascinating, and I completely agree with what you're saying around how we level up as a society. Daniel, I'm interested to know what you think in the context of changing these goals. How do we find a goal as a species which is a little bit more sustainable, something that actually drives this higher purpose and could be an answer to the questions that such comfort would raise?
Oof. Yeah, of course, the first step is to reevaluate what our goals are now. And of course, there's so many different ways we could look at this. You could just look back at, again, I keep going back to these because I'm probably biased by philosophy, but like keeping flourishing pretty much is one of the best goals. I can't get myself out of it. It's like this fundamental goal that I can't, like everything from like drinking your water to eating your food and then extrapolating yourself or think about how to efficiently model an LLM. Like it's human flourishing. Hopefully so, right? With an LLM, like when the goals start to get a little bit more abstract, you could probably manipulate them, you can code them, you can also lose track. So we should just monitor. I don't know the end, what the goal should look like. I haven't spent time on thinking about that. They will probably always filter back down to some sort of human flourishing. We always say people first. Yeah, yes, people first, always. I would like to touch on Ismail's point. I think it relates to some extent. So this man, I was reading up last night. It's called Vaclav Smil.
Yeah.
So he is specialized in energy. Yeah, yeah. And so he says energy is a universal currency. It is the only universal currency.
Yeah.
If you think about it, like what I just said, pretty much it's a fundamental, is it a force? It's a fundamental thing of the universe. There's energy. We eat food. There's heat. It all falls back to this category.
You know about it with your currency.
Actually, some physicists argue, I don't even know if it's an argument, it might just be an objective fact that mass and energy are actually the same thing. Because it's just all mass is stored energy. That's what they say. And then like maybe you can filter to that down to something more fundamental, which is information and the process of the information. So that's like the funnel. So yeah, the energy is a universal currency. Yeah, so here I've got a quote, the history, and he links this to how the use of the energy is a good predictor, or how we use energy is a great predictor of the advancement of human civilization. Back to what you guys were saying, the type 1 civilization, right? So it all ties in. So the history of successive civilizations, the largest and most complex organisms in the biosphere, has followed this course. Human dependence on ever highly energy flows can be seen as an inevitable continuation of organismic evolution. So energy is really the thing. Like if you don't have energy, it's going to be hard for you to run. It's going to be hard for you to type, right? We know what it feels like to be on 1 hour sleep.
Wow, interesting just see yesterday that.
Yeah, it's like, how can we function? Energy is a fundamental principle that we should follow. So it's important that we address this issue. Yeah.
Just wanted to add also, because I was generalizing the fact that we are, of course, privileged to be in a state where we don't have to worry about food, shelter, and the lot. But there's a massive inequality in the world where, yes, people have those different goals. And I think that's probably one of the first facts that needs to be addressed first, right? We're having massive amounts of patches of innovation, whereas other areas, not so much. But also, just before I go off and give it to one of you guys, quite a while ago, I was reading, what's the book called? Neil deGrasse Tyson's what's his book? I know his book is Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. And in the end of the book, after the exploration of astrophysics and his studies and everything else around it, he comes to say that this wouldn't have been possible if, I'm paraphrasing here, I didn't put myself first to explore rather than putting that same money that we've all spent to fix the problem of inequality. Innovation happens because of the lack of distribution at the moment, right? Because you're putting more money into something when you could have put it in something else. And as the leading countries that like we are in, unfortunately, that means that the money we have and we have in abundance is not going to places where they have lack of the necessary means. So there's debate as to whether like, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Obviously, it's bad in some sense, right? But would we be in the same place we were 10, 15 years ago if we didn't put that innovation? Because the conditions are improving there too as a result of innovations here. But it's just we have that gap, right? I just thought maybe we'll bring it up in a future episode about
Fusion is important there.
100%.
Well, I think the point you raised is brilliant, and I think the answer is one that's incredibly multifaceted, because as we've seen, you can't just ship money off to a country and hope they sort it out for themselves.
No, sure.
Because if they haven't increased the income per capita already, if they've not pulled themselves out of that pit, then frankly, sending more money over there will just result in what we see right now in certain countries where a very, very select few have taken all that money and had to consolidate it. And the wealth gap between the two populations is huge. And at the same time, we can't turn around and just blame those countries for not pulling themselves out of their own hole, because we in the West have, I say we in the West, select individuals in the West, because we can't just load blame onto the shoulders of the West for the sins of a few people. We still harvest an immense number of natural resources from relatively impoverished countries. And we do so in a way which is not particularly humane. I'll bring up Cote d'Ivoire and the diamond mines over there, but the Democratic Republic of Congo has a lot of lithium there. You were talking about batteries earlier. Where do we source the lithium? The DRC doesn't have, as far as I'm aware, the greatest track record for humanitarian work. So that's who talking to buy as well. And this comes back to like taking individual accountability. If everyone were to turn around and say, right, here's our infrastructure, here's our product line, we're getting our resources from here, and we visited, we can guarantee the quality of life and the pay and all that to the individuals who are actually extracting that at the moment, I think we'd be in a much better place to then actually be of assistance to countries where they haven't already got this technology. Instead of keeping them down, we help elevate them by sharing what we've discovered, rather than just pumping loads of money into them, because money's a tool. It's not an end. Whereas something like education and knowledge is an end.
That's quite an interesting point, because I do agree on the fact that there's not much humanitarian sort of support going into those countries. No. And if you see Sudan as well, it's like very interesting how the gold and resources have been taken. And I think it's more so because of, well, you could argue it's a generational thing as well, in terms of where colonization and the whole lot of it is that we are used to taking stuff that isn't ours, is the best way to put it, right?
Fair enough, yeah.
Not necessarily I'm not saying that everything we take isn't ours, but if you just look into the history of like how things are, it's like colonization was okay and now it's not okay. But it's not that as a mentality it's completely eradicated, because a lot of the connections between countries came as a result of colonization, right? And I think it's more so that as a country, because we were built on those foundations, the people don't see it as a problem, as a direct problem they can see, if you know what I mean. I'm not necessarily saying that like people are blind to it, or people like don't take it as a priority. Maybe some people do take it as a priority. There are people protesting about it and everything else. But what I'm saying is that maybe it's more so of like a mindset thing as well and how we deal with it, right?
No, I don't disagree. I think the only issue is like, it's not as if all of our problems in the West have been sorted.
Yeah.
We discuss at great lengths my own political disillusionment and lack of faith in the structures that govern us. And you look at the cost of living crisis across the UK, but also across the States and Canada, and you look at all these places. The people have their own concerns, right? And it's rather difficult to be worrying about other people's lot when your own lot is something that you worry about daily. Like if you're living month to month, no, you don't care what's going on in Africa and how people are being exploited. No, because that's not your problem to solve. As Jordan Peterson said, you have to clean up your own room before you can try and clean up the world, right?
Nice.
And this is where like, and those individuals should be focusing on their family for sure. But this is where it comes down to governance, because if we had individuals in governance who were slightly more ethically driven and competent, we would not be seeing quite the level of exploitation that we still see today. And I do hope that actually energy abundance will not only bring a solution to wars for resource and exploitation around those resources, an energy that's actually shared with humanity for the greater good of the same. But I hope that actually it provides a focal point like space as a positive solution for the challenges that actually you raised early in this episode. Population will grow. We're not overpopulated. But in the future, I think it's great that humanity continues to reproduce and grow. And how do we support ourselves, right? Rather than just culling people off. Energy abundance provides an answer, because energy abundance will facilitate that vertical farming. It will facilitate the abundance of everything else, that universal, like what you're talking about, that universal currency. Having enough energy will be enough.
It gives more people jobs as well. Like we were saying, oh, I could because there are robots doing other things.
Yeah,
there are less jobs, but actually jobs are just shifting, like they always will. More jobs will be taking away jobs. Not really. We'll find a way.
We would do jobs if it's with every like technological transformation, more jobs always created than like lost, right? It takes time for that feedback loop to get back to us, right?
And I think that's just like, that's where we need to be exercising care, right? Because if the population all of a sudden finds themselves, generally speaking, out of a job, like irrespective of whether or not you put them on universal basic income, what will that do to people's satisfaction and like gratification levels? That's giving no purpose. No, it's, and this is where like some people will still have purpose. You know, if you're a family man or you're faithful, or you might have focal points in your life that aren't your work. But for those for whom like money is their focal point and their work is their life, if all of a sudden they're out of work, like,
yeah,
what does that mean?
I mean, I got a stat here. There's 76. Okay, global energy employment reached 76 million people last year. Up more than 5 million since 2019. So, I mean, 2019 until now, like now we're gonna just grow in terms of energy demand and knowledge. And how many engineers have we been talking to that just say, "Oh, I can't really find a job." Like they are so clever and they've done so many, like engineering's a tough degree, and they go and saying like, "I can't find a job." I can't believe it. Like the skill set is immense. And now we've got energy. So that's a big engineering problem. There you go. Like, yeah, okay, maybe not that simple, but it just opens it all up. And we're not even like halfway there to type 1.
Yeah. And well, I mean, like you give people the resource to be creative and they can be creative. I guess the only issue is so much good comes of struggle. And I mentioned this last episode, I think, or episode prior, but what Simon Sinek says about like the value of the agony of development, like that iterative process and actually working for that abundance, like that question will be raised, but you can still find that in the creative process. These people who can't find jobs, like if there's energy abounding, well, you could just go out and create some stuff.
Right? That's what I would say. Create your product thing. Do something good for humanity.
Like, don't become a cog.
It's the mentality, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Be independent, be confident, take risks.
Regards to educating people on those.
Yeah. I mean, it's become a hot topic for me this year. I know there's some comments on it and all stuff anyway, but it's like US and Europe mentalities is like a big problem. It's like Europe, there was some slides on this as well on LinkedIn, which will probably be there, but we are behind and we're not getting better. That as a Europe, like
We are definite pessimistic.
yes, exactly. Because like we've been heard that as AFC, right? And it's just, if you go to US, I'm not saying it's the same like in UK, we have startups. I'm not saying we don't. But there was by the way, actually, I just remembered it. The UK, not the UK, it's crazy, right? You're the EU. The EU makes more money from finding US tech companies than the amount Europe tech companies make. Deep that, right? We make more money finding Apple, OpenAI, and the lot than we make as Europe in terms of our profits as tech companies.
What's going on here?
If I can quickly jump in, because I think what you say, I mean, you're so right that there's a massive disparity in attitude. But I just want to reframe safety.
Yeah.
Because for the people listening, safety sounds great. But we should be thinking of safety as negative liberty. This is the difference. In the States, you have more of a drive towards positive liberty, which is the freedom to do things, whilst over here in Europe, you have more negative liberty, which is the freedom from.
They're like hindering the innovation.
And I think the problem is like negative liberty. Yeah, you want to be safe from people dumping radioactive waste in your back garden.
That's all. If we rolled over the fence.
You want to be safe from in your home. You don't want it to be legal for someone to just come in and kill you. Like this,
Or just take your stuff.
yeah. You don't want these things to be legal. So there does need to be an element of law and order within society. But the current emphasis on negative liberty in the UK and the EU with CDCs, as central bank digital currencies coming in the EU, like they're taking cash down to, I think it's 10,000 euros is the legal limit for cash now.
Yeah.
In anti-money laundering, but that's treating all of us like criminals because there are some criminals out there. We can't, this is not how we grow as a society, is turning around and going, there are bad people, so you can't do this thing because some people do this and do it in a way that's bad. Like,
Yes, you're changing it from like outside and then in instead of from the inside out.
yeah,
Stop creating bad people.
it's just more control.
It's frightening because like as Europe, it just shows that we've not fostered the environment for innovation to thrive. And that's a problem.
And this is where like energy abundance in a European context, which is naturally more socialist, naturally more centered on that negative liberty, that would, to my mind, cause more issues here than it would in the States, because you have more positive liberty to take that energy and do with it what you will. Whereas over here, God knows that there will be.
I mean, they're working on a major project up north, but if I'm not wrong, they're over budget and their timeline is longer than.
Was this the nuclear power plant?
This is the, what's its name?
I have it here. If it's the nuclear power plant,
It is the nuclear power plant.
they are so over budget. It is like beyond belief.
And it just comes. I'm not saying
It's billions, right?
it's billions, right?
Over budget.
I'm not saying that we as Europe or UK are incompetent. We just don't have the right attitude. We don't have the right attitude or competency to have that level of sacrifice that people in the US do. It's just, I just see it in social media, in companies that are there. If you go on I was actually talking about this with my dad yesterday, which was that if I go on YouTube, and I follow a lot of people on YouTube when I watch stuff. I like cinematic content, a lot of the time vlogs, and I'm yet to find someone in UK to have the same as. This is probably a shout out to his name is Jed Cal. He does a 9 to 5, and then a 5 to 9. Dude, he does like. Why is this here? He goes he went to university, went out, got a job, did 9 to 5, 5 to 9, right? He then switched to full content, right, when it was making enough money. Got burnt out from content because the routine's not the same, right? Wake up at 1 p.m. is not the same as wake up at 9. As soon as he got back into the software engineering grind, because of the constraint of time and the mentality that he had, it was sort of like, well, now I can do 9 to 5, and now I'm more excited to do the 5 to 9 because I'm in the workplace, and then other guys also doing the same thing pretty much. Like I've seen other podcast interviews, and it's like, well, everyone else wants to do that. And there was a survey was saying in the US that people are more inclined to make money outside of their 9 to 5 than here. People are more comfortable in Europe to have a stable job than have something to get out of that job. So in the US, people percentage wise, I don't know I'll probably bring the exact percentages next time, but the census, I don't know if it was a whole census, was in fact that people in the US would rather work their job, go home, and try and make their financial freedom work. Whereas UK, they're more concerned about having their stable job and having their life freedom work.
Imagine if they have like universal basic income. They would, originally it would be awesome for.
It would be seen to a greater extent, because I think that even with universal basic income in the US, people would still want to be doing.
Ismail, on what you were talking about in terms of massively overregulated and negative liberties in the UK in relation, especially to nuclear power. I have pulled this up now. Hinkley Point C is the reactor you're talking about, and it was meant to be finished this year, and the cost was meant to be £18 billion. It's now not expected to be online before 2030, with risks pushing that back to 2031. And the costs have already ballooned to 35 billion now, potentially reaching 46.
So what sort of energy is this generating?
This is a fission. It's a fission reactors.
And Lingham fusion.
And the Nuclear Regulatory Review 2025 turned around and basically stated that and I quote, the UK is the most expensive place in the world to build a nuclear power station, due to overly complex, risk-averse landscape. And it's just this complexity, the legislative complexity and the risk-averse landscape, this negative liberty, is not liberty at all. At this point, it's become suffocating, both to innovators, but actually to humanity's growth. It's suffocating.
Imagine I just thought about this. Quick point. Imagine you have a bit of land that is perfect for this fission plant.
Yeah.
And you have people living on it. And it's just because they don't want to move, which is fair. Like, we can't just strip these people out, right? But then the US. Yeah, did you? Yeah. But what are you going to do? What is it they say no? But this is for the betterment of humanity, and they're just like, nah. Tough, right?
Oh, that's it. Well, that's good, man. So bringing this up because I know some people said this to me actually. What they do in US is a lot of people did sell their homes, and the ones who were left were forced to sell their homes because of all the construction going on around them.
Yeah.
That's just the perks of cutthroat capitalism.
There is actually legislative. There's a legislative process which supports the fact that actually in the public interest, they can seize that land. I don't know what that is at the moment. We'll drop in the description these legislation. But
there is hope for UK and Europe. It's just we need to do something about it.
We need to become more positive, liberty oriented.
Yeah.
We need to be pushing people to do things. You out and do things. Like what you brought up. I know that this is seriously off piste, but you sent me an incredible podcast by Human Garage. So shout out to them. But they were talking about how the human body isn't intelligent enough to process negative messaging. So when you see a sign that says "Don't die," the human brain actually, and physiologically speaking, isn't intelligent enough to process the positives behind that statement, right? So instead of live, don't die is a different message to
Yes.
live.
Yes.
And this is where I think we just need to reframe the attitude in Europe towards growth and towards freedom. And the power structures at the moment that are curtailing that, working actively to curtail that with social media arrests here in the UK and digital ID, all the rest coming over. We need to be pushing back hard for a future where we can turn around and say, this is a place I want to live. This is a place I want to grow and build. Otherwise, as we've seen, people will just move.
Just live instead of don't die.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They're making hard to like split.
It's just, yeah, it's major. I think it was, there was a figure saying that 700,000 people left this year to buy a camp. A lot of you owner, but to this high value individuals.
Both in terms of their net worth, but also what they could do, their potential.
Yeah. People with the skill sets and the money as well. Is just, if they get a package somewhere else, they're doing things. So we need to make UK great again. Make Europe great again. Is we just need to have the mindset that we push us forward, really.
Yeah.
At all a bit.
Yeah. One pusher for fission and nuclear energy. So 1 kilogram of uranium can generate the energy of 20,000 kilograms of coal.
Yeah.
And then what you've just told me was fusion is 4 times more. So by the way, I was listening to something. So the difference between fusion and fission is the splitting of atoms. Fusion is the merging, right? So if that's 20,000 times 4 is 80,000. When in nature can you get a 1 to 80,000 ratio? It's kind of difficult. So welcome to technology, and let's do it. Yeah, for sure. But I would like to make another point. Currently, my last one is that let's not forget that energy is actually free. So it's I could go to a tree and eat an apple.
Yeah.
I didn't pay anything for that. The tree didn't pay anything to generate that apple either. But I could go to a restaurant and eat a really nice, fine dining thing, or your best ingredient. It was apple tart or something like that. Oh yeah, I could eat an apple tart or whatever, right? But I pay for that.
Yeah.
It's a different concentration and structuring of the energy. And why is the energy so expensive now? Well, pretty much, nuclear energy is trying to simulate the same environment as a star.
Yeah.
So that's
when we bloody attempts, we have a star.
Yeah, exactly. We have a star. Yeah, but these are the problems that we're trying to face, and it will just it costs a lot because we need the research, we need to pay manual labor, and they should be paid. They do their life paid well. Yes, they do paid very well because this is a huge problem. So let's go.
What are your concluding thoughts, Arsha?
Spawn sentence data centers aren't the problem.
Thank you. That's it.
But that's those people who are saying we can connect the house to the grid or stuff. It's just not a problem. It's not a global problem. It's not a global problem. It's just a local problem, and it's not about the energy. It's just about the efficiency of the infrastructure. So it's just a local problem.
Ismail, your final thoughts.
All right. So I think that this is a good opportunity for Europe and UK to rethink how they do things and really think about what the implications are of this mentality and community that we're building. But also, like Archer was saying, we need to be able to address the main advancements we are having with society and accommodating for the energy required so that we're able to push this innovation and as humans level up. That's all from me.
That's brilliant. And you've practically summed up my final thoughts too. But I will say my hope is that a world with energy abundance will be a world where opportunity will also abound. A world where we need to fix ourselves. We can't rely on energy abundance to fix the problems in society today.